The gunshot echoed across Main Street as Clara Foster stood frozen, watching the man she'd come to love face down, death itself. Ethan Cole, the widowed rancher who'd asked for a plain bride to avoid heartbreak, now risked everything for the beautiful woman he never wanted but couldn't live without. Her past had arrived with vengeance, and in this dusty Wyoming town, only one man would walk away alive. My friends settle in for a tale of unexpected love and courage in the Old West. Before we begin, drop a comment sharing what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let's ride back to where it all began. The October wind carried more than dust across the Wyoming prairie. That morning, it carried the weight of a man's last hope. Ethan Cole stood on his weathered porch, his calloused fingers trembling slightly as they gripped a letter that had traveled 2 months to reach him. The paper, now soft from countless readings, contained the matrimonial agency's response to his desperate plea. "Send me a plain woman," he had written in a moment of profound loneliness and practical necessity. "Beauty killed me once. I need steady hands, not a pretty face." The drought had taken everything but his stubbornness. His cattle were down to 30 head from 200. The well ran lower each day, matching the depths of his solitude. 3 years had passed since Martha died in childbirth, along with their son, 3 years of talking to ghosts and empty rooms. The ranch needed a woman's touch, but more importantly, Ethan needed someone who wouldn't remind him of what love could do to a man. He folded the letter carefully, tucking it into his vest pocket as he heard the distant whistle of the Union Pacific. The train would arrive in Willow Creek within the hour, bringing Miss Clara Foster, described by the agency as competent, hardy, and possessed of no remarkable beauty. Perfect. Exactly what he'd asked for. Ethan hitched his 2 horses to the wagon, checking the reins twice out of nervousness rather than necessity. The ride to town usually took 40 minutes, but today it felt like both an eternity and an instant. His neighbors had heard about the mail-order bride, of course. In a town of 300 souls, secrets lasted about as long as morning dew. "Getting yourself a new woman, Cole," Jake Patterson had asked at the general store last week, his tone carrying that particular brand of sympathy mixed with curiosity that small towns perfected. "Getting help for the ranch," Ethan had corrected, his jaw tight. Nothing more. But even as he'd said it, doubt gnawed at him. What kind of woman would travel 2,000 miles to marry a stranger? What desperation drove her west? The agency had assured him she was respectable, from good family. Fallen on hard times. Her letters, 2 brief practical notes about travel arrangements, revealed nothing of her character beyond neat penmanship and proper grammar. The town materialized through the heat shimmer, its single main street bustling with unusual activity. Word had spread. Mrs. Henderson stood outside the millinery shop, pretending to arrange bonnets in the window. The Mackenzie boys loitered near the depot, supposedly loading feed, but clearly waiting for the show. Even Reverend Phillips had found reason to be walking past the station just as Ethan pulled up. "Morning, Ethan," the Reverend called out, his round face beaming with barely contained excitement. "Fine day for new beginnings." Ethan merely nodded, tying off the horses with movements made mechanical by repetition. His boots struck the wooden platform with hollow thuds as he positioned himself where the passenger car would stop. Other men might have brought flowers. Others might have worn their Sunday best. Ethan stood in his work clothes, clean but worn honest clothes for an honest arrangement. The train's whistle shrieked again, closer now, and Ethan's heart performed a peculiar dance in his chest. Not excitement, he told himself. Apprehension. This was business, a practical solution to practical problems. He needed someone to help with cooking, cleaning, perhaps the chickens. Someone to share the brutal work of keeping a ranch alive in unforgiving country. Romance was for fools and young men, and Ethan was neither. The great iron beast rolled into the station steam, hissing like 100 snakes break squealing protest against the rails. Ethan watched the passenger car windows, trying to spot her, trying to prepare himself for disappointment, or relief, or whatever emotion awaited him. The conductor stepped down first, placing a wooden step for the passengers. An elderly couple emerged, then a traveling salesman Ethan recognized from previous visits. Then the world stopped. The crowd's collective gasp reached Ethan's ears as if from a great distance. From the dim interior of the passenger car stepped a vision that shattered every expectation, every carefully constructed wall he'd built around his heart. Clara Foster was beautiful. Not just pretty, not merely attractive beautiful, in a way that made the October sun seem dim by comparison. Golden hair swept up in a practical style that only emphasized the elegant line of her neck, eyes the color of prairie sky after rain, a figure that her modest traveling dress couldn't disguise, moving with a grace that belonged in ballrooms, not barnyards. No! Ethan breathed the word escaping before he could stop it, but she was already walking toward him, her gaze finding his with unerring accuracy among the gawking crowd. Her trunk followed, carried by a porter who seemed equally entranced. Every step she took felt like a nail in the coffin of Ethan's carefully ordered plans. Mr. Cole. Her voice carried a slight tremor, nervousness perhaps, or fatigue from the journey. I'm Clara Foster. Up close she was even worse, or better, or Ethan's mind scrambled for purchase on the sliding slope of his composure. She smelled of lavender and train smoke, an oddly appealing combination. Her extended hand waited between them, a bridge he wasn't sure he could cross. There's been a mistake, he said, his voice rough as sandpaper. Her hand dropped. Something flickered across her features. Hurt. Disappointment. I assure you, Mr. Cole, I am the woman you corresponded with through the agency. The agency said... He stopped, aware of their audience. Half the town pressed closer, eager for drama. They described someone different. Clara's chin lifted slightly, and in that small gesture Ethan saw steel beneath the silk. They described me accurately, Mr. Cole. I am competent. I am hardy. As for my appearance... She paused, and something shifted in her expression, a shadow of desperation quickly hidden. I cannot help how I look, sir, but I can help with your ranch, which I understand is what you need. The crowd murmured. Mrs. Henderson clutched her husband's arm. The Mackenzie boys exchanged glances that would become bar talk within the hour. Ethan stood paralyzed. Send her back. That would be cruel and would make him the talk of the territory. Keep her. That would be madness. Martha had been beautiful too, and loving her had nearly destroyed him when she died. He'd specifically asked for Plain to avoid this exact situation, this immediate unwanted stirring in his chest. Mr. Cole, Clara said quietly, stepping closer so only he could hear. I've traveled 2,000 miles. I've left everything behind. Please, at least give me the chance to prove I'm more than my appearance. Her eyes held his, and in them he saw something that gave him pause. Fear. Real, bone-deep fear that she tried to hide behind pride. Whatever had driven Clara Foster west, it was more than adventure or romance. She needed this arrangement as much as he did, maybe more. Fine, he heard himself say. We'll try it, but this is business, Miss Foster. Nothing more. Relief flashed across her features before she schooled them back to composure. Of course, Mr. Cole. Purely business. He loaded her trunk onto the wagon, noting its weight with surprise. Whatever she'd brought it was substantial. Clara climbed onto the bench without assistance, arranging her skirts with practiced efficiency. Ethan took his place beside her, acutely aware of every inch of space between them. As they rolled out of town, he could feel the eyes following them, could imagine the conversations already beginning. Did you see her? What's a woman like that doing with Cole? This won't end well, mark my words. Your ranch, Clara said once they'd cleared the town limits. Tell me about it. Ethan glanced at her, suspicious of the interest. It's struggling. Drought's been hard, down to 30 head of cattle, wells running low. And you manage it alone? Since my wife died, yes. The words came out harsher than intended, a clear warning against further questions on that topic. Clara nodded, accepting the boundary. I grew up on a farm, she offered, before circumstances changed. I know animals. I know work. This isn't some gentleman's farm back east, Ethan said. This is survival, every day. No servants, no ease, no comfort. I didn't expect comfort, Mr. Cole. They rode in silence for a while, the wagon wheels creating a rhythm against the rutted trail. The October sun climbed higher, warming the air enough that Clara unpinned her traveling jacket. The movement was simple, practical, but Ethan found himself looking away, disturbed by how even mundane gestures seemed graceful when she made them. "There," he said roughly, pointing ahead. "That's the ranch." The homestead sprawled before them, a modest two-story house with a wrapped porch, a barn that needed painting, various outbuildings in varying states of repair. Set against the endless prairie with mountains rising in the distance, it looked both brave and lonely, a small stand against the vastness. Clara studied it without speaking for a long moment. "It's beautiful," she finally said. Ethan snorted. "It's falling apart." "Beautiful things often are," she replied quietly, and something in her tone made him wonder if she was talking about more than the ranch. They pulled up to the house, and Ethan jumped down, reaching reflexively to help Clara before catching himself. She climbed down on her own, smoothing her skirts and looking around with those impossibly blue eyes. "Where would you like my trunk?" "Your room's upstairs, first door on the right." He hefted the trunk, surprised again by its weight. "What did you pack Stone's books?" she admitted with a small smile. "I couldn't leave them all behind." "Books?" he repeated flatly. "You brought books to a ranch. Knowledge doesn't take up much room, Mr. Cole, and provides comfort on long evenings." He carried the trunk upstairs, Clara following. The room had been Martha's sewing room, converted hastily for Clara's arrival. Clean but sparse, a bed dresser, washstand, single chair. Clara entered behind him, moving to the window that overlooked the barn. "This will do perfectly," she said. "Thank you." Ethan set down the trunk, eager to escape the sudden intimacy of being in a bedroom with her. "I'll show you the kitchen. You'll be doing the cooking." "Of course." The kitchen was the heart of the house, a large room with a massive wood stove, long table, and shelves lined with preserves from better years. Clara ran her fingers along the surfaces, checking for dust, examining the stove's condition, taking mental inventory of supplies. "You've been living on beans and biscuits," she observed, not a question. "Gets the job done." "I'll need supplies from town. Flour, sugar, some spices, salt pork if Henderson's has it." "We go to town once a month." "Then we'll make do." She was already rolling up her sleeves despite still wearing her traveling dress. "The chickens, where are they?" "Coop's behind the barn. They're about the only things that aren't dying of thirst." Clara nodded, all business now. "I'll see to them after I change. And the well." "West side of the house. But like I said, it's low. We ration." "Understood." She turned to face him fully. "Mr. Cole, I know this isn't what you expected. I know you're disappointed." "I'm not disappointed," he interrupted, then realized that wasn't exactly true. "I'm concerned. This arrangement was supposed to be simple." "It can be simple," Clara said. "We both need something. You need help with the ranch. I need—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I need a new life. We can give each other what we need without complicating matters." Ethan wanted to laugh at the naivety of that statement. Nothing about Clara Foster would be uncomplicated. Her mere presence complicated everything. But what choice did he have now? "Fine," he said. "You cook, clean, help with the chickens and garden. I'll handle the cattle and heavy work. We eat breakfast at dawn, dinner at dusk. Sundays we go to town for church and supplies. That's the arrangement." "Agreed." She extended her hand again, and this time Ethan took it. Her skin was soft, but her grip firm. "Partners. Partners." He confirmed, releasing her hand perhaps too quickly. He left her to settle in, returning to the barn where work always waited. But focusing proved impossible. Through the barn doors, he could see Clara emerge from the house in a simple work dress, still too fine for ranch work, but more practical than her traveling clothes. She moved to the chicken coop with confident strides, and soon he heard the birds' excited clucking as she scattered feed. "Damn agency," he muttered, attacking a broken stall door with perhaps more force than necessary. "Plain. I said plain." The afternoon wore on. Ethan repaired fences, checked on the cattle, did everything possible to avoid the house. But as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, hunger and courtesy demanded he return. The smell hit him first: bread. Fresh bread when he hadn't had any in months. Then something else rich and savory. He entered through the back door to find the kitchen transformed. Not in appearance, it was the same room, but in spirit. Steam rose from pots on the stove. The table was set with plates he'd forgotten he owned. Clara stood at the stove, stirring something, a flour smudge on her cheek, that made her look impossibly young. "Dinner's nearly ready," she said without turning. "There's hot water if you want to wash up." Ethan stood frozen in the doorway. This was what he'd wanted, wasn't it? A woman cooking dinner, making the house feel lived in again, but he'd imagined someone motherly, comfortable, safe. Not this bright creature who made his kitchen feel like foreign territory. He washed at the pump outside, taking his time trying to prepare himself for the ordeal of sharing a meal with her. When he returned, Clara was placing a pot of stew on the table, alongside the fresh bread and butter she had somehow conjured. "Sit," she said, and he obeyed, feeling like a guest in his own home. The stew was incredible. Ethan had forgotten food could be more than sustenance. The vegetables she'd found in his meager stores had been transformed into something that actually tasted good. The bread was warm, soft, perfect. "This is good," he managed between bites. "Thank you." Clara ate with neat precision, her manners speaking of a more refined upbringing than ranch life typically produced. "Tell me about the water situation. You mentioned the well is low." Grateful for a practical topic, Ethan explained about the drought, the failing water table, his unsuccessful attempts to dig new wells. Clara listened attentively, asking intelligent questions about soil types and underground streams. "My father was interested in geology," she explained at his surprised look. "I read his books. There might be water closer than you think, just need to know where to look." "You read geology books," Ethan said flatly. "Among others, yes." "What kind of woman reads geology books?" Clara's expression shuddered slightly. "The kind you apparently married Mr. Cole." The word married hung between them like a challenge. They weren't married yet, that would come Sunday at church. This week was a trial, though Ethan suspected the town would give him no peace if he sent her away now. "We should discuss expectations," Clara said, setting down her spoon. "Beyond work duties." Ethan's throat went dry. "What kind of expectations?" "Marriage typically implies certain arrangements." Her cheeks colored slightly, but she maintained eye contact. "I assume separate bedrooms?" "Yes," Ethan said quickly. "Definitely." "And in public, what should the town see?" "Cordial partners, nothing more," Clara nodded. "I can do cordial." They finished the meal in silence. Clara rose to clear the dishes, but Ethan stopped her. "You cooked. I'll clean." "That's not... In this house, we share work fairly." He took the plates from her hands, careful not to let their fingers touch. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be hard." Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Good night, Mr. Cole." "Ethan," he said abruptly. "If we're to convince the town, you should probably call me Ethan." "Then you should call me Clara." "Good night, Ethan." The sound of his name in her voice did something uncomfortable to his chest. He turned to the dishes, not trusting himself to respond. Later, as he lay in his bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person in the house, floorboards creaking overhead, water being poured into a basin, Ethan stared at the ceiling and wondered what he'd gotten himself into. He'd wanted help. He'd gotten it. Clara was clearly capable, probably more so than he'd expected, but he'd also wanted peace, and looking at Clara Foster being near her brought anything but peace. 3 years he'd been dead inside, moving through days like a ghost, feeling nothing beyond the basic needs of survival. One afternoon, and already that numbness was cracking, letting in sensations he'd forgotten existed. The way lamplight caught in her hair, the efficiency of her movements, the slight tremor in her voice when she'd said she needed a new life. What was she running from? Because she was running that much was clear. No woman who looked like Clara Foster came to Wyoming territory for adventure. Something had driven her here, something that made marrying a complete stranger seem like the better option. He should send her away. Tomorrow, before this got more complicated. Give her money for a train ticket anywhere she wanted to go. It would be the kind thing, the smart thing. But even as he thought it, he knew he wouldn't. Partly because he did need the help. Tonight's dinner alone proved that. Partly because sending her away now would make him a fool or a villain in everyone's eyes. But mostly because of that fear he'd seen in her eyes at the station, quickly hidden, but real. Whatever Claire was running from, she'd chosen him as her refuge. The irony wasn't lost on him, a woman seeking safety with a man who couldn't even save his own wife. But perhaps that was fitting. Two damaged people using each other for survival. As long as they both remembered it was just business they might manage. Thunder rumbled in the distance and Ethan sat up. Thunder in October after months of drought. He moved to the window watching clouds build on the horizon. Maybe rain, maybe nothing. The weather here was cruel that way, promising relief, then withholding it. A light moved in the barn and Ethan frowned. Clara's room was dark, so it wasn't her. He pulled on his pants and boots, grabbed his rifle from beside the door, and stepped onto the porch. The light bobbed again, a lantern. Ethan moved silently across the yard, rifle ready. Horse thieves had been active lately, and with only 30 head of cattle left, he couldn't afford to lose even chickens. He reached the barn door, took a breath, then burst inside, rifle raised. "Don't move!" Clara spun around, dropping the bucket she'd been carrying, water splashing across the floor. "Ethan?" He lowered the rifle, heart pounding. "What are you doing out here?" "The animals needed water. I heard them restless." She was in a wrapper over her nightgown, thoroughly improper, thoroughly distracting. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't. I saw the light, thought." He gestured with the rifle. "Oh." She looked at the spilled water with dismay. "I'm sorry. I should have told you. I often can't sleep, and I find work helps." "Can't sleep?" She shrugged, not meeting his eyes. "New place, I suppose." Another lie, or at least not the whole truth, but Ethan didn't press. They were entitled to their secrets. "I'll help," he said, setting aside the rifle. "Show me what needs doing." They worked in companionable silence, filling water troughs, checking on the horses. Clara moved confidently in the barn, clearly comfortable around animals. When they finished, she turned to him with a small smile. "Thank you. I know this isn't what you wanted." "It's fine," he said gruffly. "Is it?" She stepped closer, looking up at him in the lantern light. "Because you've been avoiding me all afternoon." "I've been working." "You've been hiding." The directness caught him off guard. "You don't know me well enough to say that." "Perhaps not, but I know fear when I see it." She tilted her head. "What are you afraid of, Ethan?" "You," he thought but didn't say. "Afraid of the way you make me remember I'm alive." "We should get back," he said instead. "Dawn comes early." Clara studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Of course." They walked back to the house together, the threatened rain still holding off the night air cool against their skin. At the porch, Clara paused. "I meant what I said earlier. We can keep this simple." Ethan looked at her hair coming loose from its pins wrapper, clutched closed eyes, earnest in the darkness, and knew she was wrong. Nothing about this would be simple. "Good night, Clara." "Good night, Ethan." Inside they went to their separate rooms, but Ethan lay awake long after her footsteps faded. The house felt different with her in it. Fuller, yes, but also charged with possibility, with danger. He'd invited beauty back into his life, the very thing he'd sworn to avoid. Martha's photograph sat on his dresser, her smile frozen in time. "I'm trying to be practical," he told her image. "I'm trying not to feel." But even as he said it, he knew it was already too late. Clara Foster had arrived, and with her came all the complications he'd tried to avoid. The question now was whether he was strong enough to maintain the walls between them, or whether, like his failing well, he would eventually run dry of resistance. The thunder rumbled again, closer now. Maybe it would rain, maybe the drought would break, but Ethan suspected that the storm inside his house would prove far more dangerous than any weather nature could provide. He closed his eyes, trying not to think about Clara sleeping just above him, trying not to wonder what had driven her west, trying not to admit that for the first time in 3 years, he was curious about tomorrow. The first drops of rain hit the roof just before dawn, a gentle patter that grew into a steady rhythm. Ethan woke to the sound, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar noise after so many dry months. Then he heard movement overhead. Clara was already awake. He dressed quickly and headed downstairs to find coffee already brewing, the kitchen warm with purposeful activity. Clara stood at the stove, fully dressed, her hair pinned up severely, looking like she'd been awake for hours. "Rain," she said simply, but her smile was radiant. "Your drought might be breaking." "Might be," Ethan agreed cautiously. He'd learned not to trust weather in Wyoming. "Just a shower, probably." But it wasn't. The rain continued through breakfast eggs. Clara had somehow coaxed from the chickens more of that miraculous bread coffee strong enough to wake the dead. They ate while watching water streak the windows, both afraid to speak of it, as if words might break the spell. "I want to look for water today," Clara announced suddenly. "New well sites." In the rain. Especially in the rain, you can see how the water moves where it naturally flows. She was already reaching for her shawl. "Do you have shovels?" "You're serious." "Completely." Against his better judgment, Ethan found himself following her into the rain carrying shovels and a pickaxe. Clara walked the property with strange intensity, occasionally kneeling to examine the soil, tasting dirt, like a crazy woman making notes in a small journal she'd produced from somewhere. "Here," she finally announced, pointing to a spot near a stand of cottonwoods 30 yards from the current well. "Water's here." "How can you possibly know that?" "The trees, the slope of the land, the type of grass growing." She was already grabbing a shovel. "We dig here." "That's solid rock under there." "Then we'll need the pickaxe." She was already starting her fancy dress, soaking through mud, splashing her skirts. Ethan watched in amazement as this beautiful woman attacked the earth like a miner seeking gold. "You'll ruin your dress," he pointed out. "I have others." She didn't stop digging. "This is insane." "Possibly." Still digging, with a sigh that was part frustration, part admiration, Ethan grabbed the pickaxe. If nothing else, it would prove to her that water dousing was nonsense. They worked through the morning rain streaming down their faces, clothes plastered to their skin. Clara's determination was infectious, and Ethan found himself attacking the rocky soil with increasing vigor. When they hit rock, he swung the pickaxe while she cleared debris. "This is pointless," he said after 2 hours, but he kept swinging. "Faith, Ethan. Have a little faith." Faith. He'd lost that along with Martha. But something about Clara's certainty made him continue. The rain had stopped, sun breaking through clouds when his pickaxe broke through to something hollow. The sound was different, not the ring of rock, but something else. He swung again, and suddenly water bubbled up through the crack. "Clara," he breathed. She was beside him instantly, both of them staring as water, clear, cold water, began filling the hole they'd made. "We need to widen it," she said, but her voice was thick with emotion. "Make a proper well." They worked with renewed energy, expanding the opening, watching as water continued to flow. Not a trickle, but a steady source, as if they'd tapped into an underground river. "How?" Ethan asked, staring at the miracle. "How did you know?" Clara was crying, tears mixing with rain and mud on her cheeks. "My father taught me. Before he died, before everything went wrong, he taught me about water and land and reading the earth's signs. Your father was a geologist. Among other things." She wiped her face, leaving mud streaks. "He was brilliant and foolish in equal measure. Lost everything trying to fund his expeditions, left nothing but debts and knowledge." It was the most she'd revealed about her past, and Ethan filed it away. Clara's father had died in debt. That explained some things, but raised other questions. "This changes everything," he said, looking at the water. "With reliable water, we can expand the herd, irrigate crops." "We can survive," Clara corrected. "We can build something lasting." "We." The word hung between them, loaded with implications. When had they become we? "You're covered in mud," Ethan observed, deflecting from the dangerous territory of partnership. Clara looked down at herself and laughed a real laugh, not the careful sounds she'd made before. "So are you." He was. They were both disasters, clothes ruined, hair plastered, mud everywhere. Standing there beside the new well, they looked like they'd been through battle together, which Ethan supposed they had. "Thank you," he said quietly. "It's just water." "It's hope," he corrected. "I'd forgotten what that felt like." Clara's expression softened, and for a moment the carefully maintained distance between them wavered. Then she stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "We should clean up. The town will talk if they see us like this." "The town already talks." "Then let's not give them more ammunition." They walked back to the house, maintaining careful space between them. But something had shifted. Working together, fighting the earth together. Celebrating together, it had created a connection Ethan hadn't anticipated. While Clara went upstairs to change, Ethan pumped water from the old well, stripping off his muddy shirt to wash at the trough. The rain had left everything fresh, clean, renewed. Even the air tasted different, charged with possibility. Ethan. He turned to find Clara on the porch, changed into a clean dress hair repinned. She held something in her hands, a bottle. "I brought this from home," she said, descending the steps. "Whiskey, good whiskey. I thought perhaps to celebrate the well." "It's midday." "It's a miracle," she countered. "Miracles deserve toasts, whatever the hour." She was right. Ethan took the bottle, pulled the cork, and took a swig. The whiskey burned, but it was indeed good, better than anything available in Willow Creek. He passed it back to Clara, who surprised him by taking her own drink without coughing or gasping. "To water," she said, passing it back. "To unexpected partners," he replied. Then wished he hadn't. The word unexpected carried too much weight. They stood there passing the bottle, watching the sun dry the land. The moment felt suspended, dangerous in its intimacy. Two strangers who weren't quite strangers anymore, celebrating a victory neither had expected. "I should start dinner," Clara finally said, breaking the spell. "I should check the cattle." But neither moved immediately. They stood there, the space between them full of unspoken possibilities, until Clara finally turned away. "Clara," Ethan called after her. She paused but didn't turn. "You're not what I expected, but I'm glad you're here." She looked back then, a smile playing at her lips. "You're not what I expected either, Ethan Cole, but perhaps that's for the best." She went inside, leaving Ethan alone with his confusion. He'd wanted simple. He'd gotten Clara. The two were mutually exclusive, and he was beginning to suspect that was exactly what he needed, even if it wasn't what he'd asked for. The weeks that followed the discovery of the new well transformed the ranch in ways Ethan hadn't dared imagine. With reliable water, the grass grew greener, the cattle gained weight, and even the chickens seemed to lay with more enthusiasm. But the most profound change was in the rhythm of daily life with Clara. She rose before dawn without fail, had coffee ready when he came downstairs, and worked alongside him with a determination that both impressed and unsettled him. They fell into patterns. Morning chores done in companionable silence, meals shared with carefully neutral conversation, evenings spent on opposite sides of the parlor, him reviewing ledgers while she read her books. "What are you reading tonight?" he asked one evening, 3 weeks after her arrival. The question had become routine, safe territory between them. "A treatise on soil composition," she replied without looking up. "Your south field might support wheat if we amend the soil properly." You want to plant wheat now?" "Next spring. We'll need to prepare through winter." She finally raised her eyes to meet his. "Unless you plan to survive solely on cattle." "I've survived this long." "Surviving and thriving are different things, Ethan." There it was again, that directness that cut through his defenses. Clara had a way of stating truths he'd rather avoid, of pushing against the boundaries he tried to maintain. The following Sunday marked their 4th trip to town together. By now, the initial shock of Clara's beauty had faded into sustained curiosity. The women watched her with sharp eyes, cataloging every gesture, every word. The men watched her too, but differently, and Ethan found himself moving closer to her during those visits, a protective instinct he didn't want to examine. "Mrs. Henderson wants me to join the Ladies' Aid Society," Clara mentioned as they left the general store, their wagon loaded with supplies. Would it help with acceptance?" Ethan considered this. "Maybe. Those women control the social life of Willow Creek." "Then I'll join." She adjusted her bonnet against the sun. "We need allies, not enemies." We again. Always we now, as if their partnership had evolved beyond mere arrangement, which it had, Ethan admitted privately. Somewhere between the shared work and quiet evenings, they'd become a unit functioning together despite the careful distance they maintained. That night, coyotes came for the chickens. Ethan woke to squawking and Clara's voice shouting from downstairs. He grabbed his rifle and ran out to find her in her nightgown and wrapper, holding a lantern in one hand and a shotgun in the other. "Where did you get that?" he demanded. "My trunk." "Stay back." She fired into the darkness, the sound explosive in the night. The coyotes scattered, but one circled back bolder or hungrier than the rest. Ethan raised his rifle, but Clara was already reloading with practiced efficiency. Her second shot caught the coyote mid-leap, dropping it mere feet from the coop. "Good God," Ethan breathed. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My father believed women should know how to protect themselves." She was shaking now, the adrenaline fading. "Are the chickens safe?" He checked the coop, finding all birds accounted for, though thoroughly ruffled. "They're fine. You saved them." "We saved them," she corrected, then swayed slightly. Ethan caught her elbow, steadying her. "You're freezing." She was. The October night was cold, and she stood barefoot in the dirt, her thin night clothes offering no protection. Without thinking, Ethan shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered, and suddenly they were standing too close, the night too intimate around them. "We should go inside," Ethan said, roughly stepping back. Clara nodded, but as she turned, she stumbled on the uneven ground. Ethan caught her again, and this time she fell against his chest, her hands bracing against him. For a heartbeat they stayed frozen, her warmth seeping through his shirt, her breath quick against his neck. "Clara," he said, not sure if it was warning or plea. She pulled away, clutching his coat closed. "I'm sorry. I'm not usually so clumsy." They walked back to the house in charged silence. At her bedroom door, Clara paused, shrugging off his coat to return it. "Keep it tonight," Ethan said. "It's cold." She looked at him for a long moment, something vulnerable in her expression. "You're a good man, Ethan Cole. Better than you think you are." Before he could respond, she disappeared into her room, leaving him standing in the hallway with too many feelings he didn't want to name. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Jake Patterson rode out from town just after breakfast, his face grim. "Ethan, we got trouble coming," he announced, barely glancing at Clara. "Railroad's buying up land for a new route. They're offering cash money, but those who won't sell—" He shrugged meaningfully. "My land's not for sale," Ethan said immediately. "Figured you'd say that. But they're playing rough. The Hendricks family sold after their barn burned down. Mysterious fire, no one could prove nothing." Clara set down her coffee cup with careful precision. "Who's representing the railroad?" Jake looked at her with surprise. "Fellow named Charles Whitmore. Fancy man from back east. You know him." The color drained from Clara's face so completely that Ethan moved toward her instinctively. "Clara, I need some air." She managed rising unsteadily. She fled to the porch, and Ethan followed, leaving Jake confused in the kitchen. "Clara, what is it? Do you know this Whitmore?" She gripped the porch rail, knuckles white. "He's the reason I'm here, the reason I had to leave. Tell me." She turned to face him, and the fear in her eyes was stark. "My father owed him money, a lot of money. When father died, Whitmore claimed I was collateral for the debt. He said he owned me, that I had to marry him or work in his household until the debt was paid. That's not legal. Legal doesn't matter when someone has enough money and power. He had documents, witnesses, he'd bought judges in his pocket." Her voice broke. "I ran. Used the last of Mother's jewelry to pay for the advertisement with the matrimonial agency. I thought Wyoming was far enough." "It is far enough," Ethan said firmly. "You're my wife now. We're not married yet, not officially. The ceremony was supposed to be this Sunday, but if he's here, then we get married today." The words came out without thought, pure protective instinct. "Jake can witness. Reverend Phillips will understand the urgency." Clara stared at him. "You do that, knowing what I'm running from." "You're not running anymore," Ethan said. "You're standing your ground." "We both are." Jake emerged from the house, clearly having heard enough. "I'll fetch the Reverend. You two get ready." Within an hour, they stood in the small church, Clara in her best dress, Ethan in his rarely worn suit. Reverend Phillips performed the ceremony with appropriate solemnity, though his eyes sparkled with curiosity. Jake and his wife served as witnesses. "Do you, Ethan, take Clara to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Clara, take Ethan to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." Her voice was steady, but her hand trembled in his. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." They hadn't discussed this part. Ethan leaned in, meaning to brush her cheek, but Clara turned her face and their lips met. The kiss was brief, barely a touch, but it sent lightning through his body. When they parted, Clara's cheeks were flushed, her eyes wide. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Cole." The Reverend beamed. The ride home was silent, both of them processing what had just happened. They were married, truly married. What had been a business arrangement was now legal binding, and the kiss, that unexpected kiss, had shifted something fundamental between them. "Thank you," Clara finally said as they pulled up to the ranch. "You're my wife. Protecting you is my job now." "Is that all it is, a job?" Ethan didn't know how to answer that. 3 weeks ago, yes. Now Clara had worked her way into the fabric of his life in ways he hadn't anticipated. The thought of Whitmore trying to take her filled him with rage that had nothing to do with duty. "We should prepare," he said instead of answering. "If Whitmore's in town, he'll hear about the marriage. He'll come." "He's not a man who accepts defeat," Clara warned. "He'll try something." She was right. 2 days later, as morning broke crisp and clear, a carriage appeared on the road to the ranch. Not just any carriage, a fancy Eastern model that looked absurd on the rough Wyoming trail. 3 men rode alongside it, hired guns by their appearance. "Stay inside," Ethan told Clara, checking his rifle. "No." She appeared beside him, her shotgun in hand. "We face this together." The carriage stopped in front of the house. Charles Whitmore stepped out, a man in his 40s, handsome in a soft, pampered way, dressed in clothes that cost more than Ethan made in a year, his pale eyes fixed on Clara with possessive fury. "Hello, my dear," he said, as if Ethan didn't exist. "I've come to take you home." "I am home," Clara replied steadily. Whitmore's gaze finally shifted to Ethan. "You must be the fool she's deceived. I'm Charles Whitmore, and this woman belongs to me." "This woman is my wife," Ethan said, "and you're trespassing." "Wife." Whitmore laughed an ugly sound. "A hasty marriage to a frontier nobody doesn't override prior claims. I have documents proving she's mine." "Your documents mean nothing here," Clara said. "Those debts died with my father." "Debts, perhaps, but not the breach of promise suit." Whitmore smiled coldly. "You agreed to marry me, Clara. I have your letters." "Letters you forced me to write under duress." "That's not how the courts will see it, especially when I produce witnesses who heard you accept my proposal." He stepped closer and Ethan raised his rifle. Now, no need for violence. I'm a reasonable man. Tell me, Mr. Cole, what would it take for you to annul this marriage, 5,010? "There's not enough money in the world," Ethan said quietly. Whitmore's expression hardened. "Everyone has a price." "Not everyone. Get off my land." "Our land, check," Clara corrected, moving to stand beside Ethan. Whitmore's face flushed with anger. "You've made a mistake, Clara. Both of you have. I don't accept defiance. And I don't accept threats," Ethan replied. "You have 10 seconds to get back in that carriage." The hired guns shifted hands, moving toward their weapons. Ethan didn't flinch, though his finger found the trigger. "This isn't over," Whitmore said. "I have resources you can't imagine. Legal means, extra-legal means. One way or another, Clara, you're coming back with me." "No," she said simply. "I'm not." Whitmore stared at her for a long moment, then turned on his heel and climbed back into the carriage. "We'll see about that." They watched the carriage disappear down the road, neither relaxing until it was out of sight. "He'll be back," Clara said unnecessarily. "Let him come." Ethan lowered his rifle. "This is Wyoming. We handle things differently here." Clara turned to look at him, something fierce and grateful in her expression. "You didn't hesitate, not even when he offered money. You're not for sale." "I wasn't before either, but that didn't stop him from trying." She touched his arm lightly. "You're nothing like him, Ethan. Nothing like any man I've known." The touch burned through his shirt. Ethan stepped back, needing distance. "We should vary our routines. Make ourselves less predictable in case he tries something." Clara nodded, accepting the retreat. "I'll start carrying the shotgun when I do chores." They spent the rest of the day on edge, watching the horizon, jumping at unexpected sounds. But Whitmore didn't return. Not that day. That night, unable to sleep, Ethan found Clara in the kitchen making tea. "Couldn't sleep either," she asked, getting a second cup without being asked. Hard to sleep when you're listening for trouble. They sat at the table, the lamp creating a circle of light in the darkness. Tell me about her, Clara said suddenly. Martha. Ethan stiffened. Why? Because she's still here, in this house in you. And if we're going to face whatever comes together, I need to understand what I'm fighting alongside. It was intrusive, presumptuous. It was also right. Ethan found himself talking words coming slowly at first, then faster. He told her about meeting Martha at a church social, her laugh that could light up a room, her terrible cooking that improved with time, her excitement about the baby, the fever that took her and their son in the span of 3 days. I couldn't save them, he finished. All my strength, all my will, and I couldn't save them. It wasn't your fault. I know that. Here. He tapped his head. But here, he touched his chest. Here still thinks I should have done something. Is that why you wanted a plain wife, to avoid feeling that kind of loss again? Yes. The admission came out raw. I thought if I didn't care, I couldn't hurt. And now... He looked at her across the table, this beautiful, brave woman who'd stood beside him against danger, who'd found water in drought, who'd made his house feel alive again. Now I realize hiding from life isn't living. Clara reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. Martha was lucky to have been loved so deeply. Not everyone gets that. Did you love someone? She withdrew her hand. Thought I did once. A young man my father approved of. But when the debts came to light, he disappeared quickly enough. Love, I learned, is often conditional. Not always. No. She studied him. What would it take for you to abandon someone you loved? Death, Ethan said without hesitation. And even then, as you've seen, the leaving takes time. They sat in comfortable silence, the tea cooling between them. Outside wind rattled the windows, winter announcing its approach. I should tell you, Clara said eventually, Whitmore won't just use legal means. He's dangerous in ways that aren't always obvious. What do you mean? Accidents happen around him. Fires like Jake mentioned, bad wells that poison livestock, witnesses who suddenly remember things differently. She wrapped her hands around her cup. He destroys what he can't own. Then we'll be ready. We can't watch everything all the time. No, but we're not alone. Jake the Hendersons, most of the town, they're good people. They'll help if asked. Why would they help me? I'm an outsider. You're one of us now. My wife. That means something here. The word wife hung between them, loaded with new meaning after their hasty marriage. They were legally bound now, but the careful distance they maintained made it feel like play acting. We should sleep, Clara said, rising. Tomorrow will be long. Every day is long out here. Yes, but some are longer than others. She paused at the doorway. Ethan. What you did today, marrying me properly, protecting me, I won't forget it. It's what any decent man would do. No, she said softly. It's what you did, and that makes all the difference. After she left, Ethan sat alone in the kitchen, thinking about promises and protection, about a woman he'd married to save, and one he'd failed to save, about the complicated knot of feelings Clara had awakened in him. The next morning brought Jake Patterson again, this time with several other ranchers. Whitmore's buying up land, Jake announced, offering twice what it's worth. Half the smaller spreads have already sold. He's trying to surround us, Clara said, understanding immediately. Control the water rights, the access roads. Tom Mackenzie nodded. Smart woman you got, Ethan. She's right. If he gets the Palmer place, he'll control the creek that feeds your cattle's summer pasture. Then we make Palmer a better offer, Ethan said. With what money? Jake asked gently. It was a fair question. The ranch was surviving, even improving with the new well, but they had no reserves for a bidding war. I have some jewelry left, Clara said quietly. My mother's. It's worth something. No, Ethan said immediately. You don't sacrifice your inheritance for my land. Our land, what? She corrected. And it's not a sacrifice if it's for our future. Our future. The words hit Ethan unexpectedly hard. When had they started thinking in terms of a shared future beyond mere survival? There might be another way, Tom said slowly. Whitmore's from back east, doesn't understand Wyoming justice. If he pushes too hard, no violence, Clara interrupted. That's what he wants, an excuse to bring in the law, paint us as dangerous frontier thugs. Then what do you suggest? Jake asked. Clara smiled, and it was sharp as a blade. We use his own methods against him. He wants to buy land. We organize the ranchers. No one sells without group approval. He tries to strong-arm anyone we all stand together. A coalition, Tom mused. Could work. It will work, Clara said firmly. Whitmore's used to dealing with individuals he can intimidate or buy. He won't know how to handle unified resistance. Over the next hours, they hammered out details. Every rancher would pledge not to sell without consulting the others. They'd share resources meant for protection supplies if anyone was cut off. It was the kind of cooperation that made frontier life possible raised to a formal level. Your wife's got a head for strategy, Jake told Ethan as the men prepared to leave. She's full of surprises, Ethan agreed, watching Clara coordinate with the ranchers like she'd been doing it all her life. When everyone had gone, Clara collapsed into a chair, exhaustion showing for the first time. You were magnificent, Ethan said. I was desperate. There's a difference. Not from where I stood. She looked up at him. You stood beside me. That's what matters. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Then Clara rose, breaking the spell. I should start dinner. Clara. She paused. We make a good team. Yes, she agreed softly. We do. That night, Ethan lay awake thinking about partnerships and marriages, about the difference between what he'd wanted and what he'd gotten. He'd asked for a plain woman to help with chores. Instead, he'd gotten Clara, beautiful, brilliant, brave Clara, who was reshaping his life in ways he hadn't imagined possible. Through the ceiling, he heard her footsteps as she paced her room. She was worried, probably planning their next move against Whitmore. The man was a real threat, one that wouldn't simply disappear. But facing it together felt different than facing his grief alone had been. This time, he wasn't helpless. This time, he had a partner worth fighting alongside. A crash from outside brought him bolt upright. He grabbed his rifle and ran out to find the barn door open, horses milling nervously in the yard. Fire! Clara shouted from the porch. The hay barn! Sure enough, flames licked at the smaller barn where they stored winter feed. Ethan ran for buckets while Clara worked to calm the horses. Together they fought the fire, joined soon by Jake and Tom, who'd seen the flames from their properties. They saved the structure but lost half the hay. As dawn broke, they stood exhausted and soot-covered, surveying the damage. Whitmore, Clara said unnecessarily. Can't prove it, Jake pointed out. Don't need to. Ethan's voice was hard as iron. He wants a war. He's got one. Clara touched his arm. Ethan, be smart about this. That's what he wants you to do, something rash. He burned our barn. And we'll rebuild, together, all of us. She looked at the gathered neighbors. That's what he doesn't understand. Every attack makes us stronger, more unified. Tom spat tobacco juice. Woman's got a point. We rebuild today, all of us working. Make it clear we won't be driven off. And they did. By nightfall, the barn was repaired, new hay brought from neighboring ranches to replace what was lost. The community's response was swift and decisive. Whitmore might have money, but he didn't have what they had. It's not over, Clara said as they watched the last wagon leave. He'll escalate. Then we'll be ready. Will we, Ethan? He's capable of worse than property damage. You think he'd actually hurt you? I think he'd do whatever it takes to get what he wants. He's never been denied anything before. Ethan pulled her close without thinking, an instinctive protective gesture. He won't touch you. I swear it. Clara didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into him slightly, accepting the comfort. I brought this trouble to you. I'm sorry. No, you brought life back to this place. To me. He pulled back to look at her. Whatever comes, we face it together. Together, she agreed. They stood there in the gathering dusk, two people bound by circumstance and choice, facing an uncertain future. But for the first time since Martha's death, Ethan felt ready for whatever came next. Not because he was strong enough alone, but because he wasn't alone anymore. The house felt different that night. The carefully maintained distance between them had shrunk, worn away by shared danger and mutual support. When Clara made tea after dinner, she sat beside him on the settee instead of across the room. When she shivered, he draped a blanket over her shoulders without her asking. "Read to me," he said impulsively, "from one of your books." She looked surprised but pleased. "What would you like to hear?" "Your choice." She retrieved a worn volume of poetry, settling back beside him. Her voice was soft as she read the words washing over him like music. He found himself watching her in the lamplight, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gentle movement of her throat as she spoke, the grace of her fingers turning pages. "You're staring," she said without looking up. "Sorry." "Don't be. It's just unexpected." "What is being seen, really seen, not just looked at?" She closed the book. "Most men see what they want to see in a beautiful woman. You see me." "You're more than beautiful," Ethan said, then immediately felt exposed by the admission. "Am I?" She turned to face him fully. "What am I, Ethan?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility. He could retreat, rebuild the walls, maintain the fiction of a business arrangement, or... "You're brave," he said slowly. "Brilliant. Stubborn as a mule when you think you're right, which is usually. You're kind to animals and tough as nails when needed. You found water in a drought and hope in a widower. You're... what? Dangerous," he admitted. "To everything I thought I wanted." "And what do you want now?" The space between them had shrunk to nothing. Ethan could smell her lavender soap, see the pulse beating in her throat, feel the warmth radiating from her body. "I don't know," he said honestly. "That terrifies me." "Me too," she whispered. They stayed frozen for a heartbeat, balanced on the edge of something irreversible. Then a howl outside broke the moment, Coyote's back for another try at the chickens. "I'll go," Ethan said, grateful for the escape. "We'll go," Clara corrected, already reaching for the shotgun. They stood guard until the Coyotes gave up, then did a circuit of the property to check for any signs of Whitmore's men. Finding nothing, they returned to the house, but the moment had passed. They said goodnight at their respective doors, each retreating to the safety of solitude. But Ethan knew something had fundamentally changed. The business arrangement was dissolving, replaced by something deeper and more dangerous. He was falling for his wife, his beautiful, unexpected wife, and he didn't know how to stop it. Worse, he wasn't sure he wanted to. The morning after their near kiss brought a cold snap that turned breath to fog and frosted the windows. Ethan found Clara already up, standing at the kitchen window with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint the mountains pink and gold. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, pouring his own cup. "Whitmore's been too quiet," she said without turning. 3 days since the barn fire. He's planning something. Maybe he gave up. Clara turned then, giving him a look that said he should know better. Men like Charles Whitmore don't give up. They regroup. She was right, of course. The attack came that afternoon, but not in the way they'd expected. Reverend Phillips rode out from town, his usually cheerful face grave. "Ethan, Clara, we have a problem," he announced without preamble. "Whitmore's filed a legal challenge to your marriage." "On what grounds?" Clara demanded. "He claims you were already promised to him, that you entered into the marriage under false pretenses. He's got a judge coming from Cheyenne to hear the case." "A judge he's bought, no doubt," Ethan said bitterly. "Most likely. But if the marriage is declared invalid..." The Reverend trailed off, but they all knew what that meant. Clara would be vulnerable to whatever claim Whitmore fabricated. "When?" Clara asked, her voice steady, despite the way her hands trembled slightly. 3 days. The hearing will be at the courthouse." After the Reverend left, Clara sank into a chair, the fight seeming to drain out of her. "He's going to win. He always had judges in his pocket back east. Why would it be different here?" "Because here you have something you didn't have before," Ethan said firmly. "You have me. You have the whole town." "The town can't fight legal documents and paid witnesses." "No, but they can testify to the truth, that we're married, that we're building a life together." "Are we..." Clara looked up at him. "Building a life together? Or are we just two people sharing a house pretending for the world?" The question cut deep because there was truth in it. They'd maintained careful boundaries, separate rooms, separate lives that only intersected for work and meals. If examined closely, their marriage might indeed look like a sham. Then we stopped pretending, Ethan said suddenly. We have 3 days. We show the whole town what we are together. And what are we, Ethan? He crossed to her, pulled her to her feet, and did what he'd wanted to do since that moment on the settee. He kissed her. Not the brief ceremonial brush of lips from their wedding, but a real kiss full of heat and promise, and 3 weeks of suppressed desire. Clara made a small sound of surprise, then melted against him, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders. The kiss deepened everything they'd been holding back, pouring into it. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. That, Ethan said roughly. We're that. Ethan. I know we agreed to keep it business. I know I said I wanted simple. But Clara, nothing about you is simple, and I'm tired of pretending I don't feel what I feel. Which is, like I'm alive again, like there's a future worth fighting for, like maybe despite everything I'm falling in love with my wife. The words hung between them irrevocable. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I can't, she whispered. Ethan, I can't do this if it's just for show, just to convince a judge. It's not. He cupped her face gently. Maybe it started that way, but it's not anymore. When I saw you at that train station, I was terrified because some part of me knew you'd change everything. And you have. I'm trouble. You said so yourself. The best kind of trouble. She laughed through her tears. You don't know what you're saying. If Whitmore wins, he won't. But if he does, then I'll follow you. Wherever he tries to take you, I'll follow. You're my wife, Clara. Not just on paper, not just for the ranch, mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, she pulled him down for another kiss, this one softer, but no less meaningful. All right, she said when they parted. We do this together, for real this time. For real, he agreed. The change was immediate and profound. That night when Clara made dinner, Ethan stayed in the kitchen helping rather than disappearing to check on animals that didn't need checking. When she read after dinner, she curled against his side on the settee. When it came time for bed, they stood at their respective doors for a long moment before Clara spoke. This is still new. We should take time. All the time you need, Ethan assured her, though his body had very different ideas. But Clara, this door stays open now. No more walls between us. She nodded, understanding. They were done with isolation. The next morning they rode to town together, not for supplies, but to be seen. Clara's hand rested on Ethan's arm as they walked down Main Street. When they stopped at the general store, he stood close enough that their bodies touched. Small gestures, but in a town starved for gossip, they might as well have been shouting from rooftops. Why don't you two look cozy? Mrs. Henderson observed, her sharp eyes missing nothing. We're newlyweds, Mrs. Henderson, Clara replied sweetly. Aren't we supposed to look cozy? Indeed, though some might say it's convenient, this sudden affection with a court hearing coming. Ethan tensed, but Clara squeezed his arm. Some might say a lot of things, Mrs. Henderson, but anyone with eyes can see what's between my husband and me is real. To prove her point, she turned to Ethan, rose on her toes, and kissed him right there in the store. Not a chaste peck, but a kiss that left no doubt about their feelings. When she pulled back, Ethan was gratifyingly dazed, and Mrs. Henderson was fanning herself with a flour sack. Well, the older woman said, I suppose that's clear enough. They made several more stops, each time displaying their newfound closeness. By the time they returned to the ranch, the whole town would be talking about the Cole marriage. That was quite a performance, Ethan said as they drove home. Was it a performance? Clara asked. Because it didn't feel like one. No, he admitted. It didn't. That evening, Jake Patterson arrived with news. Whitmore's been busy. He's brought in 3 witnesses who claim to have seen you and him engaged back east. That's impossible, Claire said. I never... Doesn't matter if it's true if they swear to it, Jake interrupted. He's also got documents, promissory notes with your signature. Forgeries. Prove it. Clara's confidence visibly wilted. I can't. Not without my father's papers, and those are back in Philadelphia. Then we need our own witnesses, Ethan said. People who can testify to our marriage, our life here. Already working on it, Jake assured them. Tom the Hendersons, even Mrs. Appleby, who never leaves her porch. They've all agreed to speak on your behalf. Will it be enough? Clara asked. It'll have to be. That night, unable to sleep, Clara found Ethan on the porch, watching the stars. Worried, she asked, settling beside him on the bench. Angry, he corrected, that he can waltz in here with his money and lies and threaten what we've built. What have we built, Ethan? Really, a few weeks of careful cooperation. More than that. He turned to look at her in the moonlight. We've built trust, partnership, the beginning of something real. Is it real? Or are we just two desperate people clinging to each other? Does it matter? Clara, I spent 3 years dead inside, going through motions, surviving, but not living. Then you arrived, and suddenly I care about tomorrow again. I care about wheat fields and water wells, and whether the chickens are happy. I care about you. Caring hurts, she said softly. When you lose what you care about, then you survive it and go on. That's what we do out here. We endure. I'm not as strong as you think I am. You're stronger. You left everything you knew, traveled across the country to marry a stranger, and when danger followed you, you stood and fought. You're the strongest person I know. Clara leaned into him and he wrapped an arm around her. They sat in comfortable silence, drawing strength from each other's presence. Tell me about the future, she said. If we win, if Whitmore goes away. What then? Then we plant that wheat you're always talking about. We expand the herd, maybe build another room on the house. Another room? For children. Eventually, if you want. The suggestion hung between them, loaded with implications. They'd never discussed children, never discussed a real future together beyond survival. I want, Claire said quietly. I lost my mother young and my father was complicated, but I always imagined having a family of my own someday. A real family with laughter and love and Sunday dinners. We could have that, here. Could we, even with how we started? My parents' marriage was arranged, Ethan said. They met 3 days before their wedding, but they built something good together, something lasting. Love doesn't always come first. Sometimes it grows from respect and partnership and shared struggles. Is that what's happening with us, love growing? Ethan was quiet for a moment. I think it already has. I just didn't want to see it. Clara turned in his arms to face him. I didn't come here looking for love. I came looking for escape. But Ethan, these weeks with you, I've never felt more myself with anyone. You see me not just the pretty face or the tragic story. You see me, and you see me. Not the grieving widower or the failing rancher, just me. They kissed then soft and sweet under the stars, a promise more than passion. When they parted, Clara stood holding out her hand. Come to bed, she said, then blushed. Just to sleep, but in the same room. I don't want to be alone tonight. Ethan took her hand, following her into the house and up the stairs. In his room, their room now, Clara changed into her nightgown behind the screen while Ethan tried not to think about the intimacy of the moment. When she emerged looking vulnerable and beautiful in the lamplight, he forgot how to breathe. They lay down together, carefully apart at first, then gradually moving closer until Clara's head rested on his chest, his arm around her. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said sleepily, I'm glad I found you. We found each other, he corrected, pressing a kiss to her hair. They slept entwined, the first peaceful sleep either had enjoyed in days. The morning of the hearing dawned gray and threatening clouds, heavy with the promise of snow. They dressed carefully, Clara in her best dress, Ethan in his wedding suit. The ride to town was quiet, both lost in their thoughts. The courthouse was packed. It seemed the entire town had turned out to witness the drama. Whitmore sat at the front, looking confident, with his hired witnesses and a lawyer who probably cost more than most folks made in a year. The judge, a thin man with cold eyes, looked like the type who could be bought for the right price. This hearing will determine the validity of the marriage between Ethan Cole and the woman calling herself Clara Cole, the judge intoned. Mr. Whitmore has presented evidence that this woman is actually Clara Foster, previously engaged to him. That's a lie, Clara said, standing. You'll have your chance to speak, the judge said dismissively. Mr. Whitmore, present your case. What followed was a masterclass in legal manipulation. The fake witnesses told elaborate stories of Clara's supposed engagement to Whitmore. Forged documents were presented with flourish. Whitmore himself testified about Clara's confused state and his concern for her welfare. She's clearly been manipulated by this frontier ruffian, Whitmore concluded, gesturing at Ethan. I'm only trying to save her from a terrible mistake. Our turn, the judge said, though his tone suggested he'd already made up his mind. Jake spoke first, testifying about Ethan's character and the legitimacy of the marriage. Tom Mackenzie followed, then Mrs. Henderson. Each testimony was heartfelt but seemed to bounce off the judge's skepticism. Finally, Clara stood to speak for herself. Your Honor, Mr. Whitmore claims I was engaged to him. This is true only in his imagination. He pursued me after my father's death, used my grief and desperation to try to force my compliance. When I refused, he threatened me with debts that weren't mine to pay, with ruin and worse. I fled, yes. I came west seeking a new life, and I found it with Ethan Cole. A touching story, the judge said dryly. But Mr. Whitmore has documents, forgeries. And even if they weren't, even if I had signed something under duress, it wouldn't matter, because I stand here today of my own free will choosing my husband. She turned to look at Ethan. I choose the man who saw me as a partner, not property, who offered protection without demanding submission, who gave me hope when I had none. Pretty words, Whitmore sneered. But you belong to me, Clara. You know it, I know it, and soon everyone will know it. No. Ethan stood, moving to stand beside Clara. She belongs to no one. She's her own woman making her own choice, and she chose me. Actually, a new voice spoke from the back of the room. I believe I have something relevant to add to these proceedings. Everyone turned to see a well-dressed elderly man making his way forward. He carried a leather portfolio and walked with the confidence of someone used to authority. And you are? The judge asked. Judge Theodore Morrison, retired, from Philadelphia. I came as soon as I received word of this travesty. Who sent word? Whitmore demanded, his confidence cracking. I did, Clara gasped. Mr. Morrison, I didn't think my letter would reach you in time. Fortunately, I was already traveling west on other business. Now then, he opened his portfolio. I have here several documents that might interest this court. First, the real promissory notes between Mr. Foster and Mr. Whitmore, which explicitly state that debts die with the debtor. No claim on family members. Those are fake, Whitmore started. I witnessed them myself, Judge Morrison interrupted. Second, I have sworn affidavits from 6 Philadelphia citizens stating that Miss Foster was never engaged to Mr. Whitmore, despite his persistent and unwelcome advances. Third, and most interestingly, I have a warrant for Mr. Whitmore's arrest. The courtroom erupted. Whitmore jumped to his feet. That's impossible. Fraud, extortion, and arson. Mr. Whitmore, it seems your methods for acquiring property in Philadelphia finally caught up with you. The authorities are very interested in speaking with you. Whitmore's face went from red to white. This is a setup. This is justice, Judge Morrison corrected. Long overdue. The presiding judge cleared his throat. Well, this puts a different complexion on things. Mr. Whitmore, you're under arrest. As for the marriage between Mr. and Mrs. Cole, I find no grounds for invalidation. Case dismissed. The courtroom exploded in cheers. Clara threw herself into Ethan's arms, laughing and crying simultaneously. Whitmore was dragged out by the sheriff, screaming threats that no one paid attention to. How? Ethan asked Clara when they could hear again. How did you contact Judge Morrison? I wrote to him the day after Whitmore appeared. My father clerked for him years ago. I hoped he might remember me, might help. You never said anything. I didn't want to give you false hope if he didn't respond. Judge Morrison approached them. Clara, your father would be proud. You've grown into a formidable woman. Thank you for coming, Clara said, gripping his hands. My dear, I owed your father several favors. I'm only sorry I couldn't help sooner, but you seem to have landed on your feet. He looked at Ethan appraisingly. We'll take care of each other, Ethan replied. Good answer. Morrison smiled. I suggest you folks celebrate. It's not every day justice actually prevails. The celebration at the saloon was raucous. The entire town seemed determined to toast the Coles marriage and Whitmore's downfall. Clara, who'd never been in a saloon before, charmed everyone with her grace and genuine gratitude for their support. "You've got yourself a treasure there, Cole," Tom Mackenzie said, slapping Ethan's back. "Don't mess it up." "I don't intend to," Ethan replied, watching Clara laugh at something Mrs. Henderson was saying. They stayed until evening, accepting congratulations and good wishes, but finally Ethan caught Clara's eye and nodded toward the door. They slipped out together, walking to their wagon hand in hand. "It's over," Clara said wonderingly as they drove home. "It's really over." "That part is. Now the real work begins. The ranch, the marriage." He glanced at her. "We've been so focused on Whitmore, we haven't really talked about us, about what this means now that the threat is gone." Clara was quiet for a moment. "What do you want it to mean?" "Everything," Ethan said simply. "I want the whole thing, Clara. The partnership, the passion, the future we talked about. Children laughing in that house, growing old together on that porch, all of it. That's a lot to want from a mail-order bride. You're not a mail-order bride anymore. You're my wife, the woman I love." Clara's breath caught. "You love me. Completely, desperately, against all my better judgment and entirely beyond my control." "Oh, Ethan." She moved closer to him on the bench. "I love you too. I think I have since you defended me against Whitmore that first time. You stood between me and danger without hesitation, without even knowing me. I knew enough. I knew you were mine to protect. And now you're mine to love. If you'll have me, really have me, not just as a business partner or protector, but as a husband." "Yes," Clara said simply. "Yes to all of it." They arrived home as snow began to fall, fat flakes that would blanket the ranch by morning. Inside, they built up the fire and stood before it, suddenly shy with each other despite their declarations. "We can still take this slow," Ethan offered. "I've been running my whole life," Clara replied. "Running from debt, from Whitmore, from feeling too much. I'm tired of running." She reached up to cup his face. "I want to be still. Here. With you." They came together in a kiss that was different from the others, deeper, more certain, full of promise and permission. When Clara took his hand and led him upstairs, Ethan followed without hesitation. Later, as they lay entwined in the bed, they now truly shared. Clara traced patterns on Ethan's chest. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I came west looking for escape and found home instead. This is home now. Our home." "Yes." She looked up at him. "Do you think Martha would approve of us?" Ethan considered the question. "I think she'd want me to be happy, to live fully instead of just existing. You gave me that back, Clara, the ability to feel joy again. You gave me safety, not just from Whitmore, but from loneliness, from the fear that I'd never belong anywhere. You belong here, with me." They kissed again, soft and sweet, then settled into comfortable silence, listening to the snow pat against the windows. "Spring will come early this year," Clara said sleepily. "How can you know that?" "I just do. And we'll plant that wheat and the ranch will prosper, and someday we'll tell our children how their parents met through a newspaper advertisement and fell in love despite themselves. Is that the story? That's our story, and it's just beginning." As sleep took them, Ethan reflected on the strange turns life could take. He'd wanted a plain wife to avoid complications and heartbreak. Instead, he'd gotten Clara, beautiful, complicated Clara, who'd broken his heart open and filled it with light again. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white, covering the scars of drought and struggle. Come spring, new growth would push through stronger for having survived the hard times. Just like them. The next morning brought a world transformed. Snow covered everything in crystalline beauty, making even the weathered barn look magical. Clara stood at the window in Ethan's shirt, watching the sunrise paint the snow pink and gold. "It's perfect," she breathed. Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind. "It's cold is what it is. We'll need to check the animals, make sure they're sheltered." "Always practical," she teased, turning in his arms. "Someone has to be. You'd stand here all day admiring the view." There are worse ways to spend a day. They dressed and ventured out together, the cold sharp but invigorating. The animals were fine huddled in their shelters, and they worked side by side distributing extra feed and checking water troughs hadn't frozen. "We make a good team," Clara said, echoing Ethan's words from weeks ago. "The best," he agreed. As they finished their chores, a rider appeared on the horizon. Ethan tensed his hand, moving instinctively toward where his rifle would be, but Clara touched his arm. "The danger's past," she reminded him. Still, they waited warily as the rider approached. It was Judge Morrison bundled against the cold. "I apologize for the early intrusion," he said, dismounting, "but I'm leaving on the noon train and wanted to speak with you first." They invited him in, Clara quickly preparing coffee and the last of yesterday's bread. Morrison accepted gratefully, warming his hands on the cup. "I have something for you, Clara," he said, producing an envelope from his coat. "Your father left this in my keeping to be given to you upon your marriage." Clara took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter and another document. She read the letter silently, tears forming in her eyes. "What is it?" Ethan asked gently. "My father, he knew about the debts, knew what might happen. He says he's sorry that he tried to protect me, but failed." She wiped her eyes. "And this other document, it's a deed. A deed to a piece of property in Colorado. Good land, he says, with mineral rights. He bought it years ago before things went bad, put it in trust for me." She looked up at Morrison. "Is this real?" "Very real. I've had it assessed. The land itself is valuable, but the mineral rights more so. There's silver there, Clara, enough to make you and your husband quite comfortable." Clara stared at the deed, then at Ethan. "We could sell it, invest in the ranch, buy more cattle, build proper irrigation." "It's yours," Ethan interrupted. "Your inheritance, you decide." "Ours," she corrected firmly. "Everything is ours now." Morrison smiled. "Your father would be pleased, Clara. You found yourself a good man." "The best," Clara agreed, taking Ethan's hand. After Morrison left, they sat at the kitchen table, the deed between them, like a promise of the future. "It changes everything," Clara said. "It changes nothing," Ethan countered. "We were already building something together. Now we just have more resources to do it with." "You really don't care about the money." "I care that it gives us security, that it means we can weather any drought, any challenge. But Clara, if that deed had never existed, if we had nothing but this ranch and each other, I'd still count myself the richest man in Wyoming." She kissed him, then pouring all her love and gratitude into it. When they parted, both were breathless. "So, Mrs. Cole," Ethan said with a grin, "what shall we do with our fortune?" "First we survive the winter, then we plant that wheat. We buy more cattle, hire some hands to help. We build that extra room you mentioned." She smiled. "We build a life, Ethan, a real life together." "Together," he agreed. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside the house was warm with love and possibility. The future stretched before them, no longer a source of fear, but of anticipation. They had found each other against all odds, two damaged souls who'd healed each other, and now they had the chance to build something lasting. Clara stood and held out her hand. "Come back to bed. It's too cold to do much else today." Ethan took her hand, following her upstairs, marveling at how much had changed in just a few weeks. He'd expected a plain bride to help with chores. He'd gotten Clara beautiful, brilliant, brave Clara, who'd saved not just his ranch, but his soul. As they settled back into bed, warm under the quilts, while snow swirled outside, Clara curled against him with a contented sigh. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what? For seeing past the surface, for giving me a chance, for becoming the man I never dared to hope for." "Thank you for bringing me back to life," he replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. "For showing me that love doesn't have to end in loss, that sometimes it's worth the risk." "Always worth it," she murmured, already drifting toward sleep. Ethan held her close, listening to her breathing, even out, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. Outside, winter raged, but inside their home, their true home now, all was warm and safe and full of promise. He thought of Martha, hoping she would approve, knowing somehow that she would. She'd want him to be happy to love again, to build the family they'd never had the chance to create. And he would with Clara. They'd plant wheat and raise cattle and fill that house with children's laughter. They'd weather whatever storms came stronger together than apart. The man who'd wanted a plain bride to avoid complications had gotten exactly what he needed. Instead, a partner, a lover, a wife, who challenged and cherished him in equal measure. Life rarely gave you what you asked for, Ethan reflected, but sometimes if you were very lucky, it gave you what you needed. Winter settled over the ranch like a thick blanket, transforming the landscape into something from Clara's books of fairy tales. But there was nothing magical about the work required to keep the animals fed and watered, the house warm, and the pathways clear. Each morning, Ethan and Clara rose before dawn, working in practiced harmony that had developed over the weeks since Whitmore's defeat. The Hendersons' barn collapsed, Jake Patterson announced one morning, arriving on horseback through knee-deep snow. Weight of the snow was too much for that old roof. "Anyone hurt?" Clara asked, already reaching for her coat. "No, but they lost most of their winter feed. Tom's organizing a barn raising soon as the weather breaks, but in the meantime, we'll share what we have," Ethan said without hesitation. "That new well means our pasture stayed greener longer. We put up extra hay." Jake's weathered face creased in a smile. "Knew we could count on you folks." Community's been stronger since that business with Whitmore, like it reminded us what matters. After Jake left, Clara found Ethan in the barn measuring their hay stores. "We can spare half and still make it through winter," she calculated, "if we're careful with rationing." "The Hendersons helped us when we needed it," Ethan replied. "Mrs. Henderson was one of the first to accept you defend our marriage to the judge." "I know, I'm not questioning the decision, just planning for it." She moved closer, her hand finding his. "That's what partners do." He pulled her against him, grateful for the warmth of her body and the cold barn. These casual touches had become natural over the past weeks, the careful distance they'd once maintained completely dissolved. "I love you," he said, the words still new enough to thrill him every time. "And I love you," she replied, rising on her toes to kiss him. "Now stop worrying. We have enough, Ethan. Enough hay, enough food, enough of everything that matters." That evening brought an unexpected visitor. A young woman appeared at their door, barely visible through the swirling snow, clutching a carpet bag and shivering violently. "Please," she gasped when Clara opened the door. "I need help." They brought her inside, Clara immediately wrapping her in blankets while Ethan stoked the fire. The woman was young, perhaps 20, with dark hair and frightened eyes. "What's your name?" Clara asked gently, pressing a cup of hot tea into the girl's trembling hands. "Rose. Rose Garrett." She looked between them nervously. "I'm sorry to intrude. I was traveling to Cheyenne, but the stagecoach broke an axle. The driver said there was a ranch nearby." "You walked here from the main road?" Ethan asked, incredulous. "That's 3 miles in this storm." Rose nodded, tears forming. "I had nowhere else to go." Claire and Ethan exchanged glances. Something about the girl's story didn't quite fit, but they couldn't turn her out into the storm. "You'll stay here tonight," Clara said firmly. "Tomorrow when the weather clears, we'll figure out how to get you to Cheyenne." Relief flooded Rose's face. "Thank you. I can pay—" "We don't need payment for basic human decency," Ethan interrupted. "Clara will show you to the spare room." As Clara led Rose upstairs, Ethan noticed how the girl clutched her bag, never letting it out of reach. His instincts, honed by years of reading people and situations, told him there was more to Rose Garrett than a simple stranded traveler. Claire returned, finding him still frowning at the fire. "What's wrong?" Something about her story. A stagecoach wouldn't be running in this weather. "Maybe she's running from something," Clara said softly. "I know what that's like, remember. This is different. She's scared, yes, but it's not the same kind of fear you had with Whitmore." Before Clara could respond, a scream from upstairs sent them both running. They found Rose pressed against the window, staring out at the snow. "He's here," she whispered. "He found me." "Who?" Ethan demanded, but he was already reaching for his rifle. "My husband, ex-husband. I have the divorce papers, but he doesn't accept them." Rose turned to them, her face pale. "I'm sorry. I've brought danger to your home." Through the window, they could see riders approaching, 3 men pushing their horses hard through the snow. Even from a distance, Ethan could see they were armed. "Clara, take Rose to the root cellar," he ordered. Bar the door from inside. I'm not leaving you. Please? He gripped her shoulders. I can't protect you both and face them. I need to know you're safe. Clara wanted to argue, he could see it in her eyes, but she nodded. Be careful. She grabbed Rose's arm, pulling the frightened woman toward the cellar entrance. Ethan checked his rifle, then his pistol, and stepped onto the porch to meet their visitors. The riders stopped just outside comfortable shooting range. The man in front was big, brutal-looking, with scars that spoke of violence as a first resort. Evening, he called out, his voice deceptively pleasant. Sorry to bother you, but I'm looking for my wife. Pretty little thing, dark hair, probably spinning some sob story about being stranded. No one here but me and my wife, Ethan replied evenly. That's so. Mind if we look around? Just to be sure. I do mind. This is private property. The man's pleasant facade dropped. Look, farmer, I've tracked that woman through 3 territories. I know she's here. Now you can step aside or we can go through you. Third option, Ethan said, raising his rifle. You leave. Now. The man laughed. 3 of us, 1 of you. You sure you want to play those odds? I'm sure I'll take at least 1 of you with me. Question is, which one wants to die for another man's marital problems? The 2 riders behind the leader shifted nervously. They were hired guns, not zealots, and dying in a snowstorm over someone else's divorce wasn't appealing. Tell you what, the leader said, bring out the woman, we'll check if she's mine. If not, we leave peaceful-like. No. No. Anyone under my roof has my protection. That's the code out here. You should know that. Codes are for people who can't take what they want. The man sneered, but Ethan caught the slight movement of his hand toward his gun. The shot came from behind Ethan Clara, who had apparently circled around through the back door instead of staying in the cellar. Her shotgun blast kicked up snow at the leader's horse's feet, causing it to rear. Next one won't be a warning, she called out, standing beside Ethan, now shotgun steady. This isn't your fight, woman, the leader snarled. You're threatening my home, Jay Shwasam. That makes it my fight. More shots rang out, but not from them. Jake Patterson and Tom McKenzie appeared from the barn rifles trained on the intruders. They'd come to collect the promised hay and walked right into the confrontation. Evening, boys, Jake said conversationally. Seems you gentlemen are lost. The leader looked around calculating. 4 guns against 3 defensive position, and his hired men were already backing their horses away. This isn't over, he said finally. Yes, it is, a new voice said. Rose emerged from the house, no longer the frightened girl, but standing straight, holding papers. These are legal divorce documents, Samuel, signed by a judge in Denver. I don't belong to you anymore. Those papers don't mean nothing. They mean everything, Rose interrupted. And if you come near me again, I'll use the other documents I have. The ones about the money you embezzled from the railroad. The ones about the man you killed in Kansas. Samuel's face went white. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Rose's voice was steel. Leave, Samuel. Leave and never come back, or I'll destroy you. For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Samuel wheeled his horse around. This isn't finished, he said. But the threat was hollow. They watched the riders disappear into the swirling snow. Only when they were gone did Ethan lower his rifle, his hand suddenly shaking with delayed reaction. Well, Jake said, that was interesting. Ma'am. He tipped his hat to Rose. You might want to explain what just happened. Inside over coffee and Clara's quick bread, Rose told her story. She'd been young and foolish, married Samuel for his charm before discovering his cruelty. The divorce had taken 2 years and most of her money, but she'd finally gotten free. She'd been running west, hoping to disappear when he'd picked up her trail. I'm sorry, she said to Ethan and Clara. I shouldn't have brought this to your door. You did what you had to, Clara said, covering Rose's hand with hers. We all do what we must to survive. But I endangered you. And we handled it, Ethan interrupted. That's what we do here. We stand together. Rose's eyes filled with tears. I've been alone so long I'd forgotten people could be kind without wanting something. Where will you go now? Clara asked. California, maybe. Somewhere far from Samuel. Or, Clara said slowly, looking at Ethan, you could stay here. We've been talking about hiring help for the spring planting. Ethan studied his wife, seeing the compassion in her eyes, but also the practical sense. They would need help, and Rose had proven she had steel beneath the frightened exterior. "Can you work?" he asked Rose. "Ranch work is hard." "I grew up on a farm in Missouri. I can work." "Then stay through winter at least," Ethan decided. "Come spring, if you want to move on, we'll help you. If you want to stay, there's a place for you here." Rose broke down crying then, overcome by the unexpected kindness. Clara held her while she wept, meeting Ethan's eyes over the girl's head with a look of such love and pride that his chest tightened. Later that night, with Rose settled in the spare room and the house quiet, Clara curled against Ethan in their bed. "You didn't have to agree to let her stay," she said. "You wanted to help her. That's enough for me." Just like that. "Clara, you have the biggest heart of anyone I know. If you see something in Rose worth saving, then I trust that." He paused. "Besides, we will need help come spring." Practical and compassionate, I chose well. We both did. They lay quietly for a moment, listening to the wind howl outside. The winter had brought unexpected challenges, but they'd faced them together stronger as a unit than either could be alone. "Do you think Samuel will come back?" Clara asked. "No. Rose has leverage on him. Men like that are cowards when someone stands up to them properly. You stood up to Whitmore for me. And you stood beside me tonight even when I told you to hide." Clara raised up on one elbow to look at him. "Ethan Cole, when will you learn I'm not the hiding type? We're partners. That means we face danger together. You could have been hurt. So could you. That's life out here, isn't it? Dangerous and difficult and absolutely worth it." He pulled her down for a kiss, pouring his fear and relief and love into it. When they parted, both were breathless. "I used to think I knew what I wanted," Ethan said. "A quiet life, no complications, no risk of loss. Then you arrived and destroyed all of that. Are you complaining?" "Never. You brought chaos, yes, but also joy, adventure, love, things I'd given up on." "You gave me a home," Clara said softly. "Not just a house, but a real home. A place where I belong, where I'm valued for more than my face or my father's debts. You see me, Ethan, the real me. And you see me, not the broken widower, but the man I could become with the right partner." "We saved each other," Clara said. "We did." The next morning brought clear skies and bitter cold. They worked together to clear paths to the barn, Rose helping despite their protests. She was a hard worker, efficient and uncomplaining, and Ethan began to see what Clara had sensed, a kindred spirit who'd been shaped by hardship, but not broken by it. "Thank you," Rose said as they fed the chickens together, "for everything." "Everyone deserves a second chance," Clara replied. "I got mine. Now you get yours." Over the following weeks, Rose integrated into their routine seamlessly. She took over much of the household work, freeing Clara to work more with Ethan on ranch planning. They spread out maps of the property, the deed to the Colorado land, and ledgers planning their empire. "If we sell the mineral rights but keep the land itself," Clara suggested, "we'd have capital for improvements, but also a fallback if things go bad here." "Things won't go bad," Ethan said confidently. "Not with that new well, not with you managing the books. Still, it's good to have options. My father taught me that before he forgot the lesson himself." "What was he like, really?" Clara considered. "Brilliant. Curious about everything. He could look at a landscape and see the story of its formation over millions of years. But he was also reckless, always chasing the next discovery, the next theory. He loved my mother desperately, and when she died, something in him broke. He started taking bigger risks, making worse decisions. I think he was trying to outrun grief." "I understand that," Ethan said quietly. "But you stopped running. You stood still long enough to heal." "I had help." He pulled her onto his lap, ignoring her laughing protest about the impropriety. Beautiful, stubborn help. "Rose could walk in. Rose is in town with the Hendersons, and you know it." He kissed her neck, smiling at her shiver. "We're alone, Mrs. Cole." "Mr. Cole?" she said, turning in his arms. "Are you attempting to seduce me in the middle of the day? Is it working?" Her kiss was answer enough. Later, as they lay tangled on the parlor rug, afternoon sun streaming through the windows, Clara traced lazy patterns on Ethan's chest. "We should get up. Chores don't do themselves." "5 more minutes," Ethan bargained, tightening his arms around her. "You said that 20 minutes ago." "And I'll say it again in 5 minutes." Clara laughed, the sound filling the house with warmth. "What happened to my practical, hard-working husband? He discovered there are more important things than chores, such as us, being happy." He grew serious. "Clara, I spent 3 years just existing, going through motions, keeping the ranch running, but not really living. You changed that. You made me want things again, dream again." "What do you dream about?" "Children playing in that yard, that wheat field golden in the summer sun, teaching our son to ride, our daughter to shoot." "Our daughter to ride and our son to shoot too," Clara interrupted. "No limitations based on what's expected." "Of course. They'll be your children too. They'll probably want to read geology books and dig wells. And work cattle and mend fences. They'll be ranch children, strong and capable." "When?" Ethan asked. "When do we start this family?" Clara smiled. "Well, given that we've been rather enthusiastic in our marital activities lately," Ethan sat up staring at her. "Are you saying, I'm saying maybe. It's too early to be sure, but I'm late and I've been feeling queasy in the mornings." "Clara," his voice was reverent, "a baby. Maybe. Would you be happy?" "Happy?" He pulled her close, his voice thick with emotion. "I'd be the happiest man alive. Well happier than I already am, which I didn't think was possible." "It might not be." "Then we'll keep trying, as often as necessary." His grin turned wicked. "In fact, we should probably practice more right now, just to be sure." Clara's laugh echoed through the house as he pulled her close again. 3 days later, the weather warmed enough for a trip to town. They needed supplies, and Clara wanted to see Doc Morrison to confirm her suspicions. Rose came with them, needing fabric for new clothes, since she'd arrived with almost nothing. The town was bustling despite the cold, everyone taking advantage of the break in the weather to stock up. At the general store, Mrs. Henderson pulled Clara aside. "You're glowing dear," she said shrewdly. "Anything you want to tell me?" "Not yet," Clara said, but her smile gave her away. "About time, Mrs. Henderson said approvingly. "That house needs children. Ethan needs family." "He has family. He has me." "Of course, dear. But babies bring a special kind of joy. Trust me, I've had 5. At the doctor's office, Clara's suspicions were confirmed. She was indeed pregnant, about 6 weeks along. Doc Morrison, no relation to the judge, was encouraging. "You're healthy and strong. Should be no problems, but you need to be careful with the heavy work. Ranch life is hard on expectant mothers." Clara left the office in a daze of joy and nerves. Ethan was waiting outside, his face anxious. "Well, September," she said. "We'll have a baby in September." Ethan whooped, picking her up and spinning her around, right there on Main Street, not caring who saw. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, earning applause from several onlookers. "Ethan," Clara protested, blushing. "Let them look. I want everyone to know how happy you've made me." The ride home was filled with plans and dreams. Names were debated, nursery locations, discussed arguments about who would teach what skills. Rose, sitting in the back of the wagon, smiled at their joy. "You two give me hope," she said. "That happiness is possible after hardship." "It is," Clara assured her. "You just have to be brave enough to reach for it." That night, as they celebrated privately, Ethan placed his hand on Clara's still flat stomach. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "I'm your father. I promise to keep you safe, to teach you everything I know, and to love you completely." "And I'm your mother," Clara added, covering Ethan's hand with hers. "I promise to show you the wonders of the world, to teach you to be strong and kind, and to always believe in you." "We're your parents," they said together, "and we already love you more than words can say." Outside, snow began to fall again, but inside their home all was warm and bright with promise. The future they dreamed of was becoming reality one day at a time. The next morning brought a letter that would change their plans significantly. It was from a lawyer in Denver regarding the Colorado property. "A mining company wants to buy the mineral rights," Clara read aloud. They're offering, Ethan, look at this number. Ethan whistled low. That's enough to buy half of Wyoming. It's enough to secure our children's future, to expand the ranch properly, to build the life we've dreamed of. It's your inheritance. Our inheritance, Clara corrected. Everything is ours, remember. They spent hours discussing it, weighing options, making plans. In the end, they decided to sell the mineral rights, but keep the land itself as Clara had originally suggested. The money would transform their modest ranch into something substantial. We could hire more hands, Ethan said, build proper irrigation, maybe even bring in some of those new cattle breeds from Texas. And that school you mentioned for the area children, we could help fund it. Always thinking of others. Community matters. You taught me that. Rose entered with tea and they shared their news with her. She was genuinely happy for them, but Clara caught a wistfulness in her expression. Rose, Clara said suddenly, there's a small cabin on the north corner of our property. It needs work, but if we fixed it up, you could have your own place. If you wanted to stay permanently, that is. Rose's eyes widened. You'd do that for me. Your family now, Ethan said simply. This ranch is going to grow and we'll need people we trust to help run it. If you're willing to stay, we're willing to make it worth your while. Yes, I'd like that very much. They shook on it, sealing another piece of their growing empire of hope and second chances. That evening, as Clara and Ethan walked their property despite the cold, she stopped at the spot where they'd found the new well. This is where it really began, she said. Where we became true partners. I think it began the moment you stepped off that train. Ethan disagreed. I just didn't know it yet. You were so horrified, Clara laughed. Your face when you saw me. I was terrified, he corrected, because I knew you'd change everything. Did I? Look around, Clara. We have water money plans for the future, a baby-coming family in Rose. 6 months ago, I was a ghost haunting this ranch. Now I'm alive again, so yes, you changed everything. We changed everything, Claire insisted. Together. They stood together in the gathering dusk, looking out over their land, their dreams taking shape in the shadow of the mountains. The journey from that first awkward meeting to this moment of perfect partnership had been unexpected, sometimes difficult, but ultimately transformative. I love you, Ethan Cole, Clara said, leaning into his warmth. And I love you, Clara Cole, my unexpected, unwanted, absolutely essential wife. I wasn't unwanted, she protested. You were. I wanted plain and simple. And instead I got beautiful and complex and exactly what I needed. He kissed her temple. Life has a way of knowing better than we do what we need. Speaking of needs, Clara said, shivering slightly, I need to get inside before this baby and I freeze. They walked back to the house, hand in hand, smoke rising from the chimney windows glowing with lamplight. It looked like what it had become, a real home filled with love and promise. Inside, Rose had dinner ready, and they sat together at the table that had once hosted Ethan's solitary meals. The conversation flowed easily, plans and dreams mixing with laughter and gentle teasing. This was family, Ethan realized. Not just blood, but choice. People who chose to stand together to build something lasting. A toast, he said, raising his coffee cup since Clara could no longer partake of whiskey. To unexpected blessings. To second chances, Rose added. To family, Clara concluded. They clinked cups, three souls who'd found each other against all odds, creating something beautiful from the ashes of their various griefs. Outside, winter continued its reign, but inside their circle of light, spring had already come. Spring arrived with a vengeance that year, the snow melting so fast that streams became torrents and the earth turned to mud. Clara stood on the porch, one hand resting on her growing belly, watching Ethan and the hired hands work to redirect the flooding away from the new wheat fields they'd planted. You should be resting, Rose said, bringing her a cup of tea. I've been resting all winter. I need to see the world coming alive again. Clara smiled at her friend. Besides, watching Ethan work has its own appeal. Rose laughed. You two are still like newlyweds. We are newlyweds, relatively speaking, not even a year married yet. Feels longer, doesn't it? In a good way. Clara nodded. thinking of all that had happened since she'd stepped off that train. The woman she'd been, then frightened, desperate running, seemed like a stranger now. This was who she was meant to be, Ethan's wife, soon to be a mother part of this land and community. A rider approached through the mud, and Clara recognized Tom Mackenzie's son, David. The young man had been sweet on Rose since she'd arrived, though Rose kept him at careful distance. Mrs. Cole. David tipped his hat, but his eyes went immediately to Rose. Miss Rose, Pa sent me to tell you folks that there's a meeting tonight at the church, something about forming a proper town council. We'll be there, Clara assured him. Would you like some coffee before you go? That's kind of you, ma'am. David dismounted, following them inside with obvious eagerness. Claire excused herself, leaving Rose to entertain their guest. The girl needed to learn to trust again, and David was patient enough to wait for her. She found Ethan in the barn, soaked and muddy, but grinning with satisfaction. Got it diverted, he announced. The wheat field's safe. My hero, Clara teased, then gasped as he pulled her against him despite his muddy state. Ethan, my dress. It'll wash. He kissed her thoroughly, his hand sliding to rest on her belly. How are you both? Perfect. The baby's been active today. I think they like the sunshine. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Well, I don't know if it's a he or she yet, do I? I don't care which, as long as you're both healthy. His expression grew serious. Clara, about this town council meeting. You should be on it, she said immediately. The ranch is thriving. We're major landowners now. You have a voice that should be heard. It would mean time away from the ranch from you. It would mean helping shape the future our child will inherit. Ethan, you're not the same man who wanted to hide away from the world. You're a leader now, whether you see it or not. He studied her face, then nodded. If they ask, I'll consider it. That evening, the church was packed. The winter had been hard on everyone, but the community had pulled through together, and there was a sense of optimism in the air. Judge Morrison, who had decided to stay in Willow Creek after the Whitmore affair, called the meeting to order. We're growing, he said simply. The railroad's bringing more settlers, businesses are opening. We need proper governance, not just informal agreements. I propose we elect a town council, 5 members to start. The nominations came quickly. Tom Mackenzie, of course. Mrs. Henderson's husband, Robert, who ran the general store. Jake Patterson. Then Clara stood. I nominate Ethan Cole, she said clearly. There was a murmur of approval. Several people seconded the nomination. Ethan stood reluctantly, but Clara could see the pride in his eyes. Anyone else? Judge Morrison asked. I nominate Mrs. Cole, Rose said suddenly, her voice carrying across the room. The church went silent. A woman on the town council was unprecedented. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. Women can't serve on councils, someone called out. Says who? Rose stood trembling but determined. Mrs. Cole found water in a drought. She organized our defense against Whitmore. She's investing in this town's future. Why shouldn't she serve? It's not proper. Robert Henderson started. Proper. His wife stood fire in her eyes. Robert Henderson. What's proper about excluding half the population from decisions that affect them? Clara Cole has more sense than most men I know, present company included. The room erupted in debate. Clara caught Ethan's eye, and he nodded encouragingly. Finally, Judge Morrison called for order. There's no law saying women can't serve, he said thoughtfully. It's unusual, yes, but these are unusual times. I say we vote. All in favor of Clara Cole serving on the council. Hands went up, not a majority, but a significant number. Mostly women, but some men too, including Ethan, Jake, and Tom. Those opposed? More hands, but Clara counted quickly. It was close, so close. Motion carries by 2 votes, Judge Morrison announced. Clara Cole will serve on our first town council. The room exploded again, but Clara barely heard it. She was going to help shape the future of Willow Creek. Her child would grow up in a town where women's voices mattered, at least a little. Walking home that night, Ethan kept his arm around her, protective against those who muttered disapprovingly as they passed. You don't have to do this, he said. It'll make you a target for criticism. I've been a target before. At least this time it's for something worthwhile. She looked up at him. Are you embarrassed? Having a wife on the council? embarrassed Clara. I'm so proud I could burst. You'll do more good than all of us combined. Together, she corrected. We'll do good together. The first council meeting was held a week later in the newly built town hall, really just a large room attached to the general store, but it was a start. Clara was the only woman at the table aware of every eye on her. First order of business, Judge Morrison said, acting as temporary chairman. The Spring Festival. It's tradition, but with our growth, we need proper organization. They discussed logistics, and Clara suggested something that caused another stir. Why not make it a Founders Festival? Honor the families who built this town, but also welcome the new arrivals. Show them they're part of something established but still growing. That's actually brilliant, Tom admitted. Shows we're not closed to outsiders, but proud of what we've built. Mrs. Cole's right, Jake added. We need both roots and new growth. By the meeting's end, Clara had won over even some skeptics with her practical suggestions and diplomatic manner. Walking home with Ethan, she felt accomplished in a way she never had before. You were magnificent, he said. You found common ground where others saw only division. I learned from watching you, she replied. The way you handle disputes between ranch hands, how you negotiate with suppliers. We're both learning to be leaders, Ethan. The Spring Festival, when it came, was a triumph. The whole town turned out, plus families from outlying ranches. There were competitions, racing, shooting, pie baking, and dancing as the sun set. Clara, now heavily pregnant, watched from a chair as Ethan danced with Rose, giving the girl a break from David's persistent courtship. Your husband's a good man, a voice said beside her. She turned to find an elderly woman she didn't recognize. I'm Sarah Palmer. My husband sold you folks hay last winter. Mrs. Palmer, of course. Please sit. The woman settled beside her with obvious relief. I wanted to thank you. That hay sale saved us. We were going to lose the farm to taxes. We needed hay, you had it. Simple business. Nothing's simple when kindness is involved. Mrs. Palmer studied her. You've changed things here, Mrs. Cole. Shown women can be more than wives and mothers. I'm proud to be both those things. As you should be, but you're also a leader, a thinker. My granddaughter sees you and thinks maybe she could be more too. Clara's eyes misted. I hope she can be anything she dreams. Because of women like you, maybe she will be. Ethan returned then, sweaty from dancing but smiling. Mrs. Palmer, might I steal my wife? The musicians are playing our song. We don't have a song, Clara protested. We do now. He helped her stand, leading her to the dance floor despite her protests about her condition. The fiddle played slow and sweet as Ethan held her, carefully swaying more than dancing. Around them, other couples joined, but Clara only had eyes for her husband. I love you, she said softly. Thank you for this life. Thank you for making it worth living, he replied, pulling her as close as her belly would allow. 2 weeks later, Clara woke to pain and wetness. She shook Ethan awake, trying not to panic. It's time, she said. Ethan was up instantly, lighting lamps, calling for Rose. They'd prepared for this, but now that the moment was here, fear crept in. Clara remembered Martha, how she'd died in childbirth. The same thought was clearly in Ethan's eyes. I'm not hurt, Clara said firmly, gripping his hand. This is different. I know, but no buts. Our child is coming and everything will be fine. Rose had already sent for Doc Morrison and Mrs. Henderson, who served as midwife. As the sun rose, Clara's labor intensified. Ethan never left her side, letting her squeeze his hand through the worst of it, whispering encouragement. You're the strongest woman I know, he said as she struggled through another contraction. You can do this. Together, she gasped. We do everything together. Hours passed. The doctor arrived, examining Clara with professional efficiency. Everything's progressing normally, he assured them. First babies take time. But as morning became afternoon, Clara grew exhausted. The pain was overwhelming, and fear began creeping in despite her earlier confidence. I can't, she whispered to Ethan. It's too hard. You can. Remember when you found water? Everyone said it was impossible, but you did it. Remember facing down Whitmore? You were fearless. You're Clara Cole, and you can do anything. His words gave her strength for the final push. With a cry that was part pain, part triumph, their daughter entered the world screaming and perfect. "A girl," Doc Morrison announced, placing the baby on Clara's chest. "Healthy and loud." Clara cried as she held their daughter, Ethan's tears dropping onto both of them as he leaned close. "She's beautiful," he whispered, "just like her mother." "She has your eyes," Clara said, though the baby's eyes were barely open. "What will you name her?" Mrs. Henderson asked, cleaning up with practiced efficiency. Clara and Ethan looked at each other, a whole conversation in that glance. "Hope," Clara said. "Hope Martha Cole." Ethan's breath caught. They'd discussed names but hadn't settled on anything definite. To honor his first wife while naming their daughter for what she represented their hope for the future was perfect. "Hope," he repeated, touching his daughter's tiny fist. "Hello, Hope. I'm your papa, and I already love you more than all the stars in the sky." The next days passed in a blur of feedings and diapers, exhaustion, and wonder. The whole town seemed to stop by with food and congratulations. Even those who'd opposed Clara's council position softened at the sight of the new family. "She'll be a pioneer," Tom Mackenzie said, peering at Hope, "born to parents who dare to be different." "She'll be whatever she wants to be," Clara said firmly. As she recovered, Clara watched Ethan with their daughter, saw him come alive in ways she hadn't imagined possible. He was tender, patient, completely besotted. Often she found him just holding Hope, talking to her about the ranch, the future, all his dreams for her. "You're spoiling her," Clara said one evening, finding them on the porch watching the sunset. "Impossible, she's only 2 weeks old, and already has you wrapped around her finger." "Like her mother," Ethan replied, pulling Clara down beside them. "My girls, my whole world." They sat together as the sky painted itself in shades of pink and gold, Hope sleeping peacefully in her father's arms. The ranch spread before them green with spring growth, the wheat field showing the first signs of what would be a magnificent harvest. "It's everything we dreamed," Clara said softly. "More," Ethan corrected. "I never dared dream this big." A rider appeared on the horizon, and Ethan tensed from habit, but it was only David Mackenzie. The young man had been coming around more often, supposedly to help with ranch work, but really to see Rose. "Evening, Mr. Cole, Mrs. Cole," he said, hat in hand. "Is Miss Rose about—" "In the kitchen," Clara said with a knowing smile. David disappeared inside, and a moment later they heard Rose's delighted laugh. Another love story beginning, Clara thought. "Think she'll say yes when he finally asks?" Ethan wondered. "I think she's learning to trust again. Love after heartbreak is scary, but worth it. So worth it," Clara confirmed, kissing him softly. Hope stirred, making the small sounds that preceded crying. Clara took her, settling her to nurse, while Ethan adjusted the shawl around them both for privacy, though there was no one to see for miles. "The council wants to build a school," Clara said. "A proper one with a real teacher from back east. Our daughter will need one eventually." "All the children will. This town is growing, Ethan. By the time Hope's old enough, who knows how big Willow Creek will be. As long as it keeps its heart. Communities are like families, they can grow without losing what makes them special if they're careful." "Speaking of growing families," Clara said carefully, "how would you feel about Hope having a brother or sister someday?" Ethan's eyes widened. "You're not—" "No, not yet, but someday. I don't want her to be alone." "As many as you want," Ethan said immediately. "Fill this whole house with laughter. Let's start with 2 and see how we survive." Clara laughed. Rose and David emerged onto the porch hand in hand. Rose's face was radiant, and David looked like he'd conquered the world. "We have news," Rose said shyly. "David's asked me to marry him." "And Clara prompted, though the answer was obvious. "I said yes." There were congratulations, Ethan, shaking David's hand while Clara embraced Rose, carefully mindful of the baby. "We want to wait until fall," David said. "After harvest, when things are settled." "You'll marry from here," Clara said immediately. "This is your home, Rose." "I couldn't—" "You could and will. We're family." Rose cried then, overcome by the generosity she still wasn't used to. David held her, whispering comfort, and Clara saw Ethan in him, a good man who'd help heal old wounds with patient love. As night fell and their guests departed, Clara and Ethan prepared for bed, Hope sleeping in the cradle Ethan had built with his own hands. They lay together, tired but content, listening to their daughter's breathing. "Tell me about tomorrow," Clara said, echoing her request from months ago. "Tomorrow we work the ranch. You'll recover your strength while bossing everyone around from the porch. Hope will charm every visitor. Rose and David will steal glances when they think no one's looking. The wheat will grow taller. The cattle will get fatter. Life will go on beautiful in its ordinariness. And next month, next year, the harvest will come in strong. We'll use the money from the mineral rights to build that school. Maybe even a library, since my wife insists on filling our children's heads with books. Rose will marry David and be happier than she ever imagined. Hope will take her first steps. Say her first words probably both earlier than expected because she's your daughter." "Our daughter. Our daughter," he agreed. "And maybe by then she'll have that sibling you mentioned." "Maybe," Clara said with a secret smile. "And in 10 years, Ethan continued, warming to the game. Hope will be riding horses and reading everything she can get her hands on. Her siblings will be running wild through the wheat fields. The town will have grown but kept its soul. You'll probably be mayor by then." "Ethan, first female mayor in Wyoming Territory. Mark my words. And you boss, so I'll be the proudest husband in the West, watching my brilliant wife change the world while raising our children to be strong and kind and brave." "You forgot something," Clara said. "What? You'll be happy, completely, utterly happy." "I already am," Ethan said, pulling her close. "How could I not be? I have you, Hope, this life we've built." The man who wanted a plain bride to avoid complications got everything he never knew he needed. "And the woman who was running from her past found her future," Clara added. They lay quietly, both thinking about the journey that had brought them here. From that first meeting at the train station, Ethan's shock, Clara's desperation to this moment of perfect contentment, it had been a transformation neither could have imagined. "I have something for you," Ethan said, suddenly getting up to retrieve something from his dresser. "I've been waiting for the right moment." He handed her a small wrapped package. Inside was a silver locket, delicately engraved with intertwining vines. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a tiny photograph of the three of them taken just days after Hope's birth by the traveling photographer who'd passed through town. "So you can always carry us with you," Ethan explained, "wherever your council duties or your dreams take you." "My dreams are right here," Clara said, tears streaming. "This ranch, this family, this life. You gave me everything, Ethan." "We gave each other everything," he corrected, fastening the locket around her neck. Hope stirred, beginning to fuss, and Clara rose to tend to her. As she nursed their daughter, Ethan lit the lamp, creating a circle of golden light in the darkness. He sat beside them, his arm around Clara, his finger caught in Hope's tiny grip. "Look at us," Clara said wonderingly. "A family." "The best kind, yeah," Ethan agreed. "Built from love, trust, and sheer stubborn determination." "Don't forget the mail-order bride advertisement," Clara added with a laugh. "Best money I ever spent on a newspaper." "Even though I wasn't plain," especially because you weren't plain. "You were exactly what I needed. Beautiful, brilliant, brave Clara who refused to let me hide from life. And you were exactly what I needed, strong, kind Ethan, who saw me as more than a pretty face or a burden to bear." They sat together in their circle of light, their daughter between them, the future stretching ahead, full of promise. Outside, the Wyoming night was vast and dark, but inside their home, all was warmth and love and hope. The seasons would turn, challenges would come, but they would face them together, partners in every sense. The ranch would prosper, the town would grow, their family would expand. Hope would indeed take her first steps earlier than expected, would devour books like her mother and ride like her father. More children would come, filling the house with laughter and chaos. Rose would find happiness with David, building her own family on the land Ethan and Clara gave them as a wedding gift. Through it all, the love between Ethan and Clara would only deepen, seasoned by shared struggles and triumphs. They would grow old together on that porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard, the wheat fields golden in the setting sun. But all of that was still to come. For now, in this perfect moment, they were simply a family, beginning their journey a widowed rancher who'd wanted to avoid pain, a desperate woman who'd needed escape, and the child who represented their combined hope for the future. "I love you," Clara whispered to both her husband and daughter. "And we love you," Ethan replied, speaking for Hope, who was falling back asleep, milk-drunk and content. The lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls, but the three of them remained still, holding each other, holding this moment, holding the entire future in their joined hands. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, but it was no longer a threat, just part of the landscape of their lives. The ranch was secure, the family was safe, and love unexpected. Transformative love had turned a business arrangement into a life worth living. As Clara drifted towards sleep, still holding Hope while leaning against Ethan, she thought about the woman she'd been when she'd stepped off that train, frightened, alone, running from a life that had become unbearable. That woman couldn't have imagined this contentment, this belonging, this absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. "Thank you," she murmured. Not sure if she was thanking Ethan, God, or fate itself. "For what?" Ethan asked softly. "For answering that advertisement, for taking a chance on me, for becoming the man I never dared to dream existed. Thank you for being brave enough to come west, for seeing past my grief to the man I could be, for showing me that love doesn't end with loss, it grows and changes and becomes something even more beautiful." Hope sighed in her sleep, a sound of pure contentment, and her parents smiled at each other over her head. This was their happily ever after, not an ending, but a beginning. Not a fairy tale, but something better. A real life built on mutual respect, shared dreams and love that had grown from the most unlikely seeds. The Wyoming night wrapped around their little house like a blanket, the stars wheeling overhead in their eternal dance, and inside the Cole family slept peacefully, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. They had each other, and that was enough. More than enough, it was everything.